Shane, I'm so excited to have you here. First and foremost, welcome. How's it going?
It's going good. Thank you, Jesse, so much for having me. I'm so excited to, talk about everything that we have kind of docketed out. It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. So I know that we're going to have fun. And I hope that our audience is ready to just expand their minds a little bit and geek out with us maybe for the next hour or so.
Definitely. 100%.
Because what we're going to be talking about a little bit about Web3, a little bit about maybe NFTs, metaverse. This has been a tiny bit of an obsession for me in the past few weeks. We were recently introduced and we chatted. And after we did, I was like, I would love to bring you onto our podcast because you geek out about this stuff too. And I want our audience to learn more about these topics. So
100%.
I am so appreciative of you coming today to be on the show. So before we get started, because I have so many questions for you, I'm going to drill you today.
Okay, I'm here for it.
Amazing. I just think we should start at the beginning.
Okay.
With first, I'd love to hear a little bit about you.
Yeah.
I would love for you to just introduce yourself to those listening and tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm actually a California native. I'm 21 years old, grew up in Southern California, and actually went to college to study journalism at ASU's Walter Cronkite School. Went into school, day one, they had us do a little activity that was, okay, all 300 of you look underneath your seat and hold up a piece of paper. And there was only 3 kids in my whole lecture hall. And they essentially told us those 3 people in the big scheme of things are going to make it in journalism. So I decided I was going to kind of change my path. And so I decided to go into PR and digital audience analysis during my time there, as well as taking on a music business degree in the Herberger School, actually under ASU as well. And then, had experience in my internships, in my upbringing, kind of in my professional career in music, working specifically with independent artists, worked with a couple larger named artists, but then with everything kind of happening, I ended up where I'm at now, which is Defy Entertainment, which stands for Don't Ever Fit In Entertainment. But, that slowly evolved into me being an A&R there, which is an artist and repertoire, to, co-managing who I co-manage now, which is Chill Pill, which is a virtual 3D artist signed under Atlantic Records. And then also Sydney Swift, who is a great producer and also our CEO and founder at the company, who I work alongside in my position now, which is head of music business affairs and Web3 services. So that's kind of my personal background in a small, I guess, concise form. But what we do at Defy is we create business development, I guess, tactics and strategies for current, I guess, labels, companies, brands, you name it, to kind of build out their presence in Web3 and in that this unknown space. 3 months ago, I had no idea what Web3 was. So this is all so new to everyone who you can quote unquote call a professional even in the space. But, turned out that I applied cold to a position I didn't even know when I first started at Defy, and I ended up where I'm at now. So yeah, I work with artists as well, and I build out their NFT projects and pair that with their Web 2.0 projects. So, let's say an artist has an album coming out, and we then bring that to Web3, and we build out a Web3 component, which I can kind of dive into later on what this all means. But that's kind of what I do here. So
amazing. Okay, so I have so many things already to say off the bat.
Yeah.
First of all, I wish that when I was 21, I was in the exciting position that you are in currently. Kudos to you, right? Because not every 21-year-old is in the position that you're in. And it's certainly not luck, in my opinion. It is a curiosity and this drive that I've sensed from you even since we first began.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny story if you want me to go into that on how we end up where we're at now. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So I remember this day vividly. It was like October 8th, 9th area. I flew out to LA to meet Sydney, who's my boss, for a artist show that we actually managed to just go to the show and spend the weekend in LA kind of working on their artist project. So I flew out to LA, got to Sid's house, and he goes, okay, get in the car. We're going to Launch House. And I was like, what is Launch House? And I'm supposed to be going to sound check to meet with the artists. Like, where am I going? He goes, do you know what Web3 is? And I go, no. He goes, do you own crypto? I'm like, no. He's like, do you know what an NFT is? I'm like, not at all. So he's like, okay, great. In the car when we're driving there, I'll give you a 10-minute like rundown. I'm like, okay. So we're in the car driving to Launch House, which is essentially like a TikTok influencer content creation house, if you think of it, but for tech and like startup companies. Really cool, based in Beverly Hills. We ended up going to this kind of like presentation that was happening. And Sydney was just like, listen, network, like just listen to all the information being tossed around and like, we'll talk about it later. You know, there's influencers in the room that, you know, are multi-million followers on TikTok and Instagram. And I'm like, why am I in this room? And Sid kind of like looked at me and my coworkers after, and he's like, okay, so did you guys get that after the speech? I was like, I'm so lost. Like, I don't know what Web3 is. Like, why is people talking about this so much? Like, I'm so lost on what's going on. But we ended up back at Sydney's studio because we were going to just kind of sit in there and brainstorm next moves on the artist side. And these two developers showed up on accident. Like, software dev people that I've never met showed up to Sydney's home on accident. He had like nominated himself up to like host an event for Launch House that we ended up canceling because I guess there wasn't like, I guess anyone like facilitating it. There was something random that came up where we couldn't have it. But these two developers were like driving to his studio, which is like at his house, and they had no service to see that the event was canceled. And so they showed up, and we were sitting in the studio when they walked in, and Sydney goes, Shane, meet so-and-so and so-and-so. And I was like, oh, hi, like, nice to meet you. I'm currently like working on the artist side, the music dev side, but you know, nothing Web3, because I could tell they were going to be like, are you in Web3? And Sid goes, Shane, what's wrong with the music industry and entertainment industry? And I kind of thought to myself, like, there's a lot that isn't, I guess, good. I wouldn't say there's anything like super wrong, because I'm new, I'm young. I don't really know like a lot about the world, but I know enough to know that ownership and, you know, creative freedom. And we kind of went through this whole, I guess, run of the muck of what's quote unquote wrong. And the developers kind of start talking to each other, and they're like kind of doing that thing where they're looking at each other and talking, but not, I guess, like talking to us, but we're still like conversing. And they look at us and they're like, well, we can help you do that. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, we can help you change that with tech in Web3. And I'm like, oh gosh, this Web3 thing again. And they started explaining to me kind of how there's tools in this Web3 world that can help entertainment professionals. They can help artists. They can help influencers. They can help creators through like smart contracts and NFTs and the tokenization of everything and the metaverse. And Sydney was like, well, let's do it. And so we had already built out a completely virtual artist, and we just didn't know what that meant, you know, in the grand scheme of things. And after that day, my job position changed completely. I dove headfirst into Web3. Sid kind of guided me through everything. And then now we're at where we're at now, and we have a metaverse building platform at the company. We can like build out individuals and companies' presence completely on the Ethereum blockchain, which I'll get into all that too. But it was wild. That was like the turning point, and it was by default completely on accident. And now looking where I'm at now, it's like I'm so grateful that those two developers walked in when they did. But yeah, that's kind of how we ended up where we're at now. And it was like, I wouldn't say luck, but it was pretty lucky. Like it was one of those things where it felt like I was in a movie where that moment could be in history books, like a year, 2 years from now, like looking back on the evolution of tech and entertainment. So it's pretty wild.
I don't know. I don't mean to get like all woo woo, but I also feel like what we put out into the universe, we get back. So like maybe it feels lucky, but like, I don't know, maybe you're just putting out something that like attracted, certain energy back to you.
Yeah. And I think that also like at the time I wasn't even graduated. Like I graduated in December, like completely with my degree and everything. And it was kind of one of those things where before that moment, I was like, am I in the right industry? Like, do I actually know what I'm doing? Like, and it was that current, I guess, crisis that I feel like a lot of people post-grad go through, or even just finding yourself and kind of like really being hard, like, this is what I want to do with my life. And that was a moment where I was like, okay, I'm in the right place. Like, I've worked my butt off. Like, this is definitely, supposed to be happening. And I'm glad I sent a cold email to Sydney telling him that I was the kick-ass A&R that he needed on day one. And to end up where I'm at now is like jaw-dropping. But I definitely think that the hustle did come in and, it was really reassuring to have that.
All of the things. I mean, and you're still hustling to this day. That's why you're there. That's why you're there, right?
Yeah.
I love your story. I know people listening also like appreciate hearing it too. Yeah. It's a great context. It's helpful to know your words. You're like 3 months ago, I didn't even know what this shit was necessarily,
Definitely. And I think everyone's still learning too. It's like, I am quote unquote a professional in this space. And like, yes, I do know a good amount, especially like when it comes to entertainment in the influencer realm and the, music artist realm of Web3. But, everyone's learning together. And that's the biggest thing in Web3. And I think in this space is like, there's no stupid questions. There's no, no one's behind. If you're even having this conversation right now and like you're even listening to our conversation currently, like you're one step ahead than a lot of people, but you're also becoming a tool that then they can ask, like, what does this mean? And you can answer. So
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And that's been my experience, at least as well. I'm like, when I'm sort of meeting people who, list something along metaverse or Web3 or crypto or NFT, like in their professional bio of some sort, I reach out and I want to learn. And I'm, immersing myself in a lot of educational resources, conversations on Clubhouse, like all sorts of stuff. And I find that the community that exists already is very welcoming, similar to yourself, which is really refreshing and good. And what I personally want to see is more women getting involved in these conversations as well.
I think that's a big, big thing. I mean, like I could go on and on about, what the experience just being in entertainment as a woman was like, and it is still like. But I think having, morals that go into it where who you are, and no matter what, like tables will be turned where people will be asking you for your professional, guidance and, consulting on certain, I guess, projects or advice on how to build out, their presence in Web3. They're going to be asking you for your knowledge. And as a woman, it's quite rare that, the equal level of, I guess, respect is automatically there. And I think what's really cool is that this is a new community. And I think, being a woman in Web3 is definitely interesting because it's, we're all empowering each other. And I've actually noticed that this community is so welcoming no matter what. And I think watching it grow and having women be on the forefront, our content team who creates all of our like digital visuals and 2D, 3D, all that, they're all women on my team. And I think that's what's really cool too, is that, working alongside such incredible women is so inspiring, but also to be like building out projects that are focused around like a women, I guess, forefronted project is so fun as well. And I have a couple of those that I'm currently doing, but yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. So look, I'm excited to talk to you about so many things today. So why don't we start at the beginning a little bit and support those listening who may even be like intimidated by hearing these new words, this new concept, and all that we've been talking about for the last bit of time, right? So like, I would love for you, Shane, to just start by even just defining some of those like key terms related to like Web3, NFT, crypto, non-fungible, metaverse, like all the things, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, 100%. I know it's honestly a lot. So I will try my best to kind of break it down. And I think the best way to do that is kind of explaining, you know, how did we get to this point? Like, how did Facebook change its name to Meta? And like how, I guess, everything's evolving into Web3. So I'll go back to what Web 1 is. Web 1, you know, you can think of this 1990s to 2000s time where, you know, you have AOL, Google, Yahoo being started, the foundation of the internet. And at the time, I guess equity, you know, is being funneled towards the founders of these companies. So you see individuals who are, you know, the group of individuals that are sitting at the top of these companies that are seeking benefits and, you know, a little extra payout when a company is successful. And then the transition of Web 2 comes in with, you know, the social media boom, what we're currently kind of in and transitioning out of. But you have Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all of these platforms, you know, being integrated for artists, because I talk to music artists all the time. So I always talk about these streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music. You know, these are now the transition of the internet. And with that being said, the equity kind of shifted there as well. So now the employees at these companies, you know, are reaping benefits when, let's say, X company is successful. And so people are kind of starting to notice like how important their employees are to the success of a company. Without them, you wouldn't have a company. So after this transition of into the social media boom, you then see the transition to Web3, which is, you know, this intimidating world of the metaverse. And the metaverse is really just like a virtual reality world that lives completely on the Ethereum blockchain or whatever said blockchain it is. And with that being said, the transfer of equity is also there. So a lot of the individuals who kind of forefronted and frontiered this Web3 movement were really emphasizing what would a company do if they didn't have, you know, the consumers, the users. For artists and musicians, I always say, you know, it's the fans, or, you know, influencers, it's their followers and who, you know, their audience is. Why aren't those individuals reaping benefits? And so that's what this equity transfer in Web3 is. It's, you know, giving back to those who are driving a project and driving a person's success or a company's success. And so that's kind of what Web3 is. It's really just the decentralization of ownership and expanding that to, you know, the broad masses of who supports that individual or company and makes it successful. An artist wouldn't be a music artist without its fans, and influencers wouldn't be, you know, influencing anyone or anything without their followers. And so it's kind of giving back to that community. So hopefully that kind of breaks down, you know, this transition of Web 1 to Web 3 in simple terms. But that's really what Web 3 is. And looking at these other intimidating words like NFTs, which is a non-fungible token, you know, that's just a component of Web 3, meaning it's an asset that has utility. So it has purpose on like with it. But yeah, that's kind of what Web 3 is in simple terms and kind of all the components that go into it.
That's very helpful. I've heard someone describe it as like, I don't know, that, you know, you're talking about like
decentralization.
Decentralization. Yeah. And I've heard someone essentially like equate it to, you know, like all of these companies have CEOs and people who are sort of like running the show and have their own agendas. And, you know, this new like Web3 is sort of like breaking down those barriers so that there's a lot more equality and opportunity. Would you agree with that assessment?
I definitely think that's accurate. I think also like a component that simplifies what you kind of just said, Jesse, is uniting a community and having this community driven factor. And I think that's kind of, you know, breaking the barriers of this, you know, governing board per se, where it's more so having a community drive a project, having a community make a decision artistically, or what partnerships a certain project should go forth with. It's having a group, a large group of individuals passionate about the mission of a project, unite together to make those decisions, rather than having, one or two people make those decisions for the community.
Totally. So, it's a concept where it's about the people.
Exactly. Yeah. Something I always say too is creating passive followers or passive fans into active fans and active followers, and really playing a large part in, a project or in a, I guess, company. Because there's a lot of companies now that are completely Web3, and having, community driven projects is way more empowering, because that's your niche. That's who's driving the success. That's who's spreading the word of mouth. So yeah, it's really making them activated in the space.
So I want to dig more into that, because I think people's ears are starting to perk up a little bit, because what that sounds like there's certainly some synergies there between everything you've been saying in the creator economy. Yeah. And when I think about influencers, and especially influencer marketing, in which they're trying to sell products and brands or services or what have you, or just have us engage their community more. All of it is based on engagement. And so to be able to create an environment in which the audience is it's possible to engage more and become more involved, that's a really, really powerful thing, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where this NFT conversation kind of comes in. So, like I said, NFTs are non-fungible tokens. So a lot of the times looking at NFTs, that's how, you have people purchasing these NFTs, which are really just digital assets that are being sold on the internet. But, you purchase these with crypto, and by purchasing one of these little tokens, you're getting access to now making, decisions. You're holding a role in, let's say, the project, and you're also being incentivized. I mean, every successful NFT project, an NFT drop is what, the lingo is, but has utility. So these holders are reaping benefits while they have these NFTs, whether that's, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say, influencers, I notice a lot of the time, it's the selling of merch and, their brand, and really advocating for who they are and what they stand for. But if you're able to almost gift out, little pieces, whether that be merch or exclusive content, or maybe meet and greets with the holdings of these NFTs, that activates an incentive to then drive up, I guess, the reasoning, why should someone purchase one of these? Why should they play a role in this community? Well, it's to give back and to give them, exclusive merch drops, meet and greets. All of that can go into the back end of these NFT projects. So by purchasing one of these tokens by using crypto, it's a way that influencers can have, one, a stream of revenue. Two, it can also be something that gives an exclusive, I guess, club component, or, a founders club component, to where you are the VIPs of this influencer's following. You have bought into their brand. You're holding that almost as a trophy, saying I am part of this community, and I'm one of the certain limited amount of purchasers that, has this granted access to these exclusive items or exclusive events. So it's really a cool way that you can activate, and get people excited to buy into a project or buy into a brand through these NFTs. So I appreciate that you're laying out real use cases, real scenarios, because so many people hear the term NFT and they don't know what it is, but they just immediately associate it with art. And while that is certainly another use case, and there are some influencers who are giving out those types of NFTs, it can be all of the other things that you mentioned and more too. Yeah. I mean, there can be, the cool thing about Web3 is that with it being one, such a new space, and two, it being such a growing space, you know, sky's the limit. And that sounds so fucking cliche. And I'm like, every time someone's like talking to me, I feel a bit corny saying, oh, sky's the limit, shoot high. But it's true because, you know, there can be in real life, you know, people always say IRL in Web3, but it's like the IRL utility, whether that's a physical hoodie or an actual ticket to a meet and greet event or a convention where you're meeting a ton of influencers. Those can be utility behind this digital component, but there can also be digital utility, which is in the metaverse. So that's where this whole like Sims, but heighten it to, I guess, like 100 levels up, but it's almost like real life Sims where you can be totally in the metaverse, but it's really just in real life, but digital. So you can have your avatars in the metaverse be wearing that influencer's merch. You can have, yeah, it's like, I could go on and on about, I guess, the potential here, but that's kind of the transition. It's really what we have now, but escalating it. And it gives creative freedom too, to the influencers and to those who are using it.
I also feel like from the influencer's perspective, a lot of influencers that I hear these days feel a little stuck. In that their like brand partnerships have historically been the majority of their bread and butter. And I'm sure you've possibly experienced that in terms of like music artists and things like that. And so just knowing that like, oh my God, there's all of a sudden now all these additional doors have just opened. And the cool thing about why I want to start having more of these conversations now, like now, like why? Because this is not new. None of this is new at all, actually. Like this is like people always reference like, you know, The Sims, like you just did, or like Grand Theft Auto, like, you know, like these are like, these are terms of, oh, if you want to experience it, like that's what it, and that those are so old. Those have been around for such a long time. I'm most excited about it now is because I'm interacting with people who would not be your typical enthusiastic person about any of this stuff. And they're getting intrigued and they're like, oh, maybe I should get some crypto in my wallet. And like, oh, maybe I should get an Oculus. And like, they're intrigued. And so this stuff is like definitely taking off. We can go on about like why that is. I do think that the pandemic and stuff did play a major part in that. But beyond that, aside from that, it's really picking up. And this isn't like theoretical and like it was, I mean, it's certainly not like small niche groups so much anymore. It's becoming more mainstream, which is pretty freaking cool to see.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely like looking at it from, you know, the COVID perspective also of like, I've worked with a lot of artists that have lost out on the live shows. And for influencers, I mean, a lot of the times I know they do tours as well, where it's, you know, meeting in person or being able to go to events on a partnership. If a partner's saying you need to come to this event and kind of advocate for it, then, you know, that was all lost. And I think that was a big, you know, everyone had a big oh no moment where we realized that when everything kind of shuts down, like, what do you do now? And that's kind of, I think, where this metaverse element really kind of took off. And I could go on and on, like you were saying, about kind of why now, but I think it's really just adding this empowering movement behind the creator economy and giving back ownership to individuals' brands, but kind of having this empowering, you can do it without very large partnerships. You can have people believe in you and believe in a project and take it to the next level. This just opens a door, I guess, for, you know, individuals in the creator space where you don't have to rely on a major corporation to be bringing you in revenue. You know, you can just be activating yourself into this Web3 world. And that's where successful projects are. It's the authenticity, you know, being real, not having a phony upfront presentation of something you don't really believe in. I think that's what's really, really interesting about Web3 is it allows people to be confident in who they are and in what they believe in, whether that be mental health awareness, whether that be, you know, eating disorders, whether that be drawing attention to substance abuse. There has been projects that look like they're just art. It looks like just an NFT drop. But if you really dive in and start looking into what a lot of these Web3 projects are, it's, providing something way bigger. And influencers have such big potential in bringing in, I guess, advocacy for certain projects that they're passionate about and certain, I guess, not talked about topics that they could really be bringing forth. And that's the power of Web3. It's like the sky's the limit. There I go again, being corny and shit. But that's it. It's you can do whatever you want to do in Web3 and no one's going to stop you. I think that's the biggest part. And that's what's the coolest part about all of this.
No, it's so cool, man. You're like, it is cheesy, but like it's exciting. Like it is what it is. Like, and it's all true. It's all freaking true. Look, you're seeing people like Ariana Grande, Travis Scott, who teamed up with Fortnite to put on shows in the metaverse. I mean, there were, I think, 200 million members. This is a stat that's really interesting. 45.8 million people watched Travis Scott's performance in Fortnite.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. In July of 2020. Go on with that, please.
There's a good example. There's this one NFT project that's called Bored Ape Yacht Club. Almost every person who steps into the NFT space, if you Google like NFT projects, Bored Ape Yacht Club's going to come up. It is like the most well-known, and it's because, think about this. There was an NFT drop. I think there was about 6,000 like actual purchasers of NFTs. Okay. They are now a $500 million company. That's insane. Like thinking of that as it doesn't take, 50 million TikTok followers. It doesn't take over 3 million followers on Instagram to be successful. You can activate yourself, and create a monumental stride by just doing something that makes sense to the average consumer. And if you do it authentically and you commit to, I guess, kind of admitting, like, I don't know everything about Web3, but I'm starting, you're going to gain the trust also of the Web3 community. They want to help projects. They're not going to be like, oh, no, you're new here, please go away. No, they want people to go Web3. They want to make this aware to the average everyday person. I mean, that's the coolest thing about all of this is that everyone is working together to empower everyone, but the potential is huge. I mean,
the potential is insane. And we're going to keep saying that because it really is worth noting. Look, if it's also interesting, like if you search on YouTube right now, I don't know, even like creator economy, metaverse, you'll like crypto, like you'll start to also see a lot of content about like making quick cash.
I guess, I mean, like, that's what we do at the company I'm at now. Defy, focuses on, long term. I think that's where a lot of these scary projects, I say scary, like, excuse me kind of saying that, but, everyone kind of has their own, I guess, goal going into the space. And whether that be a quick cash grab, that's not what we're about. And that's actually not how I think about Web3. I think that's where a lot of people who don't understand it kind of hesitate. They think there's no long-term success. They think there's no longevity behind projects, or how can this last for however long, you want it to last. And I think that's where Web3 will take over, is some people are in it for a quick cash grab up front off of first sales of NFTs, and they don't care about the rest. But if you actually are one of those people that rely on your following, so I think influencers are really, they have a lot of power in the space to be one of the first groups in industries that kind of forefront Web3, is because their followers and their audience empower them. And that's how they become so successful. And that's what makes them, a good influencer and someone to look up to, is having a following that's dedicated. Well, you want to take care of them as much as you can. And I think that's where this long-term project goals come in, is you don't want to just have a quick cash grab for yourself up front. because then you lose the trust of your followers. You lose the trust of Web3 community people also. And so it's looking at it more long term. And that's what we do at Defy, is we really take to heart, like, the least amount of time that we'll look into is a year to 2 years of a project. Like, we're looking to do this for the long term and, you know, help companies build out their components also to make it last, I guess, till the next web evolution comes in, which is terrifying to think about. But it's looking at the long term and not just for the quick cash grab.
Totally. And it sort of feels a little bit of like, I don't know, like when social media started really taking off. Because again, like when that happened, social media wasn't new. It just started taking off and really getting traction. This isn't new, but it feels like it started to take traction. So for someone who's listening, who is either a creator, like an influencer themselves, or just like an entrepreneur and, you know, a business person, whatever, who like wants to
get started.
Yeah. Like, what would you tell them? Like, how to get started? Like, what are some opportunities to look into? This is a big, broad question, but what advice would you give?
I definitely think to start, just research. Look into, you know, there's a good chunk of YouTube videos actually that break down like what an NFT actually is, you know, in 5 minutes, but they do a great job. So I'd look up like any question that pops into your head, Google it. I guarantee you there's an article or a YouTube video that breaks it down in some way, shape, or form. I also think that, you know, following projects that are really, really interesting to you, get on Twitter if you're not already on Twitter. Twitter's a huge NFT, crypto, Web3 space. I think also if you don't have a Discord already, get a Discord account, jump into servers. You can find a lot of the invites in the bios of, you know, certain projects on Twitter or Instagram. Jesse, I shared with you also like the virtual artist and influencer we created, who was the first ever like decentralized, fully virtual, I guess, influencer ever. So, you know, jump into my team's project. Also, we are more than welcome to kind of like, we would love to teach you whatever you want to know. I would definitely jump into Twitter spaces if people are talking about, you know, certain projects. Jump in, be curious, do the research. I think definitely staying up to date on what projects fail and what projects are successful and why. That was something I did in the beginning to kind of understand what it means to be a Web3 project. And, you know, ask questions. No questions are stupid at all. And I mean, you guys are more than welcome to jump in my DMs and I'll try my best to answer everyone. But I think that's it. It's just really just researching. You know, I would be more than happy to, you know, answer any questions I can when I can. But I think that's really it. It's just following influential people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And those are some really good suggestions. You're so generous with your time too. Absolutely. You know, like Discord seems to be a place where people are sort of flocking and building communities for like discussions and information sharing and stuff. And for anybody who doesn't know what Discord is, it's essentially Slack. It's very similar to Slack. It's been like, I don't know, it's been like widely used in like the gaming community, but like way beyond that. And so, you know, it's interesting. I'm part of a couple Discord servers about that as well. So I can attest to that. Twitter Spaces seems to also be a really good place. Clubhouse similarly. And I'm even on LinkedIn. They just launched, I'm beta testing actually, LinkedIn audio rooms. They just started beta testing it this week.
Interesting.
And so I'm amongst this test group and I'm noticing that like a lot of the LinkedIn creators, that's what they're talking about. So it's a lot of like audio spaces, which is interesting and cool. And I'm sure there are podcasts. You can find stuff on YouTube though as well, for sure. But I'm gonna challenge you for a second, because let's say there are some people listening who they're like, all right. Like I feel like I'm doing the research, like I've educated myself. So like, what's the next step?
So I would say hit up my info@defiant.co email, because you're going to need someone to help you build it. So that's where I'm going to, you know, self-promote here is we are a Web3 agency. We build out projects from start to finish, whether that be the NFT design to the back-end development. It takes a team who's dedicated to do it. And so that's why we do what we do at Defiant. And I don't want to quote myself on this, but I kind of do. I'm not 100% sure. But I think we're like one of the only ones in the entertainment space that actually are a full service and a like Web3 agency. But I think that would be, a good step is hitting up our website, linked email. But also, I think, if you don't really think that you're ready to kind of get involved in an agency relationship, I think, what is your purpose, outside of being just an influencer and outside of representing a brand? What is that hard-hitting mission? For example, our I Am Chill Pill project, which is the virtual influencer I was referencing, ours is advocating for mental health awareness. And that right there is like opening a door to a whole different group of audience that you didn't have before. Maybe what is something that you're so passionate about that without a doubt you could create a project around that could be, this extra utility behind yourself in this space? Because I think understanding your mission and understanding your purpose is going to be the most beneficial, because then from there, it's really just figuring out the, digital art component. What do you want the NFTs to look like? If you're going to do an NFT drop, or if you're stepping into the metaverse, like, also please hit me up and check out our website, because we do offer a metaverse building platform called Augie. So super cool things, I guess, kind of turning on this space. But I think to get started, really figure out your purpose, figure out your mission, get together with some friends and start a project there. Collaboration projects are the best way to go, because then you got a whole team on that end too, driving towards the same idea. So.
Totally. And one thing I've heard from people is like, if you want to build something in the metaverse, there is no difference between what you've built in your professional life and what you can build in the metaverse. Meaning, use that expertise. Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
No.
Like, somebody recently launched like a golf course, So like, people have, like, they buy land and they put a billboard on it, and they know a lot about advertising. And so they have that. Like, there's so many, it's like anything that's possible in your real life, what you've done IRL, like you said, is possible in the metaverse, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is like, there I go again. I'm going to be fucking corny, but sky is the limit. And like, if there's something that you couldn't do IRL, you can 120% fucking do it in the metaverse. Like, that's all I can say, because now you have, creators and developers building out your idea, meaning no one said you can't do certain things in the metaverse. So that's where sky's the limit. And that's where, get creative. If there's something you have had an idea to do in real life and you just haven't been able to do it, now's your time, because you now have another platform that you can do it in. So,
oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like, we could talk about this for so long.
I know.
I appreciate you jumping on today. Please take Shane up on her offer. She sent her, like, all the information that you shared will absolutely be in the show notes. I will be sharing that out with everybody. She was recommended to me as somebody to connect with. And as soon as we did, I was like, I love everything that you're doing. I love your curiosity. I love that you're humble. I love that you're learning just like the rest of us, and that you're generous to share what you've learned. I appreciate it. I hope everybody listening appreciates it too. And I really encourage you guys to reach out to Shane. So for those of us who are super excited about all things Web3, again, check out the description box, check out our show notes. We will absolutely list all of that here. Any final thoughts before we close today?
All I can say is thank you so much, Jessie, for having me. And thank you so much for giving me, a place where I can, advocate for Web3 and advocate for what's kind of going on in this space. And like she said, everyone, please hit me up, because the invitation's there to do so. And I love kind of, helping people get started and, spreading the word. And I think that's the biggest part, is like, we're learning together. And I think, Jessie, you having this conversation with me today, like, you are on the forefront. Let's get you into Web3. Let's get you into the metaverse. Like, let's do it. But I'm really excited to kind of continue the conversation. But thank you so much again. And thank you, everyone who listened.
Thank you guys so, so much. And yeah, there's so much opportunity, whether it's, you know, creator, influencer, brands, entrepreneurs, anything.
Everyone.
So every single one. Yeah. So you are the best. I really appreciate you coming on today. And we'll see you guys listening next week.